Thank you very much. Thank you, Casey, for inviting me to speak this evening, and thanks to you all for allowing me the opportunity to speak to you today and to introduce you to the Sidney North Saanich Industrial Group. I'd like to explain a bit about who we are and why you should care, more importantly, and talk about a housing study that we carried out with our employees last year and the results of that survey. So let me begin by introducing the industrial group. So as I say, I represent a group of 14 companies who got together about 3 years ago because we recognised that we shared common challenges and a common interest. All these companies are located around Victoria Airport in Sidney North Saanich, and we recognise that even though each company does obviously different things, common to all of us was the challenge to recruit and retain skilled workers. So Robin Richardson of Scott Plastics got the CEOs of the companies in the area together, and we formed the Sidney North Saanich Industrial Group. John Durisic is our executive director. He's here tonight. And over the past 3 years, we've been really ratcheting up the tempo on 3 key things that we care about as a group of employers in the area. Workforce housing, which is the focus of tonight's talk, skills training and transportation in the area. These 14 companies, or more importantly, the employees who are working for these 14 companies in and around the airport, represent over 2,500 employees working up there. And these people are people who buy your products. And what they've told us consistently over the past few years is that there is not enough opportunity for our employees to live near where they work. Let me introduce you to a couple of the companies, as I say, founded by Robin Richardson of Scott Plastics. Scott Plastics is a great example of the kind of companies that we have up at Victoria Airport. Many of these companies you may not have heard of. But Scott Plastics has been around for 65 years and was one of the pioneers in plastic injection moulding. And over that time, they've developed a number of niche markets, including producing plastic moulded products for the fishing industry. So those of you who fish have no doubt heard of Scotty downriggers, and also fire products. And they have a really interesting business on the industrial estate there next to the airport, churning out injection moulded parts 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Who knew? Seastar Chemicals, another company that kind of goes under the radar. They have about 60 employees, and they are the world leader in what they do. Almost 100% of their business is export, which is common to common to a lot of the businesses in the group. But almost all of that business is export, and they're the world leaders in producing very high purity, high quality chemicals for certain applications. I won't go through all of them. Some companies you'll be familiar with. Sled Lumber, I'm sure, is one of them. I work for Viking Air. I'm sure Vikings have quite a lot of press in Victoria over the past number of years, especially since about 5 years ago when we brought the Twin Otter aircraft back into manufacturing. Viking's been in operation for more than 40 years now, and has been producing parts for the aerospace industry for most of that time. We currently support almost 2,000 legacy de Havilland Canada aircraft around the world, and we produce the Twin Otter aircraft, which is the world's best-selling 19-seater passenger aircraft. And we're currently, having launched the program 5 years ago, we're currently producing 1 brand new aircraft every 2 weeks, and we employ in total 600 people, of whom about 450 work at our facility at the airport. So, between us, between the 14 companies, we employ close to 2,500 employees, 75% of whom travel up and down the Pat Bay Highway every day getting to work. So here's some statistics. These numbers are conservative. So, significantly more than $650 million in annual revenues, probably closer to $1 billion in annual revenues now. And more than 90% of, certainly for the manufacturing companies, if you take out slugs and thrifties, for the rest of us, more than 90% of our annual revenue is export. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to, I was grateful to take the opportunity to speak to you today, because, lots of people haven't heard of the companies that are operating at the airport, because so much of our business is export, and, as a result, we're not all that well known, or at least some of us. But we employ a lot of people, and we generate a lot of revenue, and that brings money into the local community, and which, ripples out to the wider community. So, almost 2,500 employees who earn, between $100 and $110 million a year in annual salaries. Only 25% of those employees live in Sidney North Saanich, so 75% of our employees travel, up the Pat Bay Highway to work every day. Which means, as far as the local community is concerned, 75% of those employees are taking their salaries and spending them outside Sydney and North Saanich. And, candidly, one of the reasons why the group got together to raise the profile of the need for housing for our workforce is because of some of the challenges that we've encountered over the years with the municipal councils, in particular North Saanich, in terms of the planning restrictions which prevent growth. And what we're saying, with an ever, more clear voice is that the constraints around development on the peninsula is preventing economic growth. It's preventing us, it's preventing the 14 companies who make up the Sidney North Saanich Industrial Group. It's constraining our ability to grow. And what we're telling the councillors and the mayors of Sidney North Saanich and Central Saanich is, we could grow more than we are if development restrictions were lifted, and we work together to encourage more development, to build the kind of houses that our employees tell us they want to live in. And you know what, if something doesn't change soon, companies are going to make decisions based on their own best self-interest. And a number of companies have got different sites elsewhere. Seastar Chemicals, for example, has got a site in the United States. And when they're deciding where to put their work, the challenges of growing in Sidney North Saanich is pretty close to the top of the list of considerations. So this is a serious issue. Roughly split 50-50 between Sidney and North Saanich in terms of the municipalities that we pay tax to. So let me get on to the survey. A year ago, having been talking about, as an employer representative, and my colleagues were doing the same thing, standing up and explaining the fact that as employers, we are highlighting the lack of available workforce housing as a constraint to growth. One of the responses that we continually got back was, okay, it's all very well you as the employer saying that, but what do your employees think? So we asked them, and we carried out a survey, a pretty comprehensive survey. These are the companies that took part. We got a pretty good response rate. The number of employees that participated represented about a third of the workforce of the whole 14 companies. And it was out of that survey that we concluded only 25% live locally and 75% commute in and out of work every day. And I've got a few slides here that summarise the kind of key highlights from that survey. So, depending on the company, between, let's say, 10 and 30% of our employees commuted for more than an hour. So the bulk of our employees, the bulk of those 75% of our employees who do commute every day, live here, live on the West Shore. But what was surprising was the number of employees who travel further than that. So between 10 and, let's say, 20% of employees were travelling further than 60 minutes a day. They were coming in from Souk, coming in from Mill Bay, from Duncan, and even from Nanaimo, driving in and out every day, down, over the Manhattan to Victoria, up the Pat Bay, working 8, 10, 12-hour shifts in the manufacturing companies at the airport, and then doing the journey in reverse in the evening, or when their shift ended. And the reason? Lack of available workforce housing on the Saanich Peninsula. And it's expensive. A 60-minute journey can cost $5,000 a year after tax. The median salary of the companies within the group is around $65,000 a year. You know, we're manufacturers, we're producing world-class products, and we employ a skilled workforce. And the median salary is $65,000 a year. But even at that salary, you know, take tax off that, $5,000 a year represents, you know, 10 to 20% of disposable income just on getting to work and back. It's a big proportion. And what our employees told us is that the proportion of their salary that they're having to spend on travel, because there is no alternative, because there's such a lack of available workforce housing that they can afford on the peninsula, they're not prepared to pay that anymore. And you know, some of those employees have voted with their feet and they've left and they've relocated and they no longer live on the island. And you know, that's a cost for us as employers to replace those people that you know, not only have we invested in for many years, but they become part of our extended family. And especially when, you know, a significant proportion of our employee turnover is a direct result of the lack of affordable workforce housing on the peninsula. So what kind of products are our employees looking for? Well, certainly there's a segment of our employee population interested in rental housing. Certainly those on the lower end of the earnings scale are interested in rental housing, as you probably wouldn't be surprised. But quite a high proportion were interested in townhouses. 40 to 50% would be interested in living in a townhouse, as opposed to driving in from Souk or Mumbai or Duncan every day. But a significant proportion, nearly half, or more than half, rather, 60%, were interested in purchasing a single family home. Again, if you look at the demographics of the kind of employees that group members employ, you know, we have workers who've been there 10, 20, 30 years sometimes. So a significant proportion of our workforce, you know, are families, they've got children, and they want to buy a single family home. So price ranges, you can read off the screen, but you know, up to about $500,000 a year. Our employees told us they'd be interested in purchasing houses. And there just isn't that availability, certainly in North Saanich. You know this better than I do, because this is your business. It's certainly not our business. We're in the business of, you know, manufacturing airplanes and chemicals and whatever else it is we do. But you know, in Sidney, clearly there's a lack of land and a lack of different opportunities to develop products. But in North Saanich, it's really around development restrictions. There's plenty of land, plenty of opportunity, we think, but the planning regulations are restrictive, and those restrictions are preventing development, which could enable our employees to live closer to where they work, which is what they're telling us they want to do. BC Ferries, obviously another big employer out there. They're not part of the group formally, but they employ a number of 100 people up at Sports Bay. And then there's all the other businesses in Sydney and North Saanich which aren't part of the group. So if you look at the total employment up around the airport, there's probably, you know, more than 5,000 people employed up there, and 3/4 of them, if our employees are anything to go by, are commuting into the peninsula every day. Some of there has been development, certainly in Sydney, but some of them are for the seniors, which have got restrictions on the age restrictions and pets and kids. Well, you know, we do employ some seniors, but more often than not, we employ people who've got families, and it's those people that we're really advocating for when we talk about the need for more workforce housing on the peninsula. Some stats about the affordability of different houses. I won't dwell on this. I think it's been touched upon in a couple of other presentations, but you know, we believe, because our employees have told us, that $250,000 to $500,000 is affordable based on a $65,000 median salary. North Saanich District Municipal Council, as you may be aware, carried out a housing strategy survey last year, which, if you follow municipal politics up there, was a bit contentious. So these are some of the findings, but the salient point for me, the thing that stood out was that 75% of the participants of this survey, which was voluntary, indicated a desire for more housing options on the peninsula, and that is totally aligned with the survey that we carried out amongst our employees. So the majority, a significant majority of the population in the area and the employees who work at the industrial group member companies are strongly in favour of more housing options in Sidney and North Saanich and Central Saanich too. I'll end with this. We received a letter from the town of Sidney, certainly supporting the industrial group's efforts to raise the profile of the need for more workforce housing in the area. And I thought it was important to end on why we think this is important. Certainly the industrial group got together, the companies within the industrial group got together in large part out of self-interest, because the challenges of recruiting and retaining skilled workers was constraining growth for each company individually and as a collection of companies within the group. So self-interest was part of it. But also, it's about, we recognise that as important employers in the area, we represent a significant contribution to the local economy, and we have an obligation to behave appropriately as corporate citizens. And our employees tell us that they want to live, and they want to live in the community in which they work. They would prefer not to have to drive for 60, 90, 120 minutes a day to commute in from far-flung places. They would much prefer to live within 30 minutes of where they work, and then can bring up their families and become part of the community in which our companies operate. And our employees, are not able to do that in a lot of cases, despite earning what is a pretty good salary, $65,000 median, because of the lack of workforce housing options on the peninsula. So the people, everybody in this room, you are involved in this, the business of producing those products, and I just urge you to urge and encourage you to support the industrial group in our efforts to really ring the alarm bells about the need to develop more affordable workforce housing solutions